into the unknown, into the unseen, the unexplainable, and the unbelievable. Join our strange journeys. Are you ready? Any thoughts or comments on the article from 1908?
Well, they had me till they threw in the part about the monkey. And then I'm like, what? This random monkey reference? What? Were there like mini organ grinders with monkeys running around Ireland at that time? Now I'm so stuck on the monkey in the context of the monkey. But if you are going to see a leprechaun, you are much more likely to see it in Ireland. And if you're going to see a leprechaun, you might be more likely to see it if you're a child, so that you're still kind of open. And it's not unusual to have apparitions or sightings like that where one person can clearly see it and the other cannot. So some of that holds a little water there, but then they threw the whole monkey thing in, and I'm like, you just lost me with the monkey thing.
It was a renegade monkey.
Wild renegade monkey.
Well, it's like, I guess like any other news reporter, they're trying to debunk it or whatever, and they're throwing this in. Saying, no, it's probably just an organ grinder lost his monkey.
As you do, because you're like, I can't keep these monkeys. They just run off all the time. I'm going to have to go out of the organ grinding business because the monkeys are too expensive to replace.
Well, that always happens with organ grinders. Look at all the shows. I think Beverly Hillbillies had a monkey escape, an organ grinder.
Yeah, they don't like it.
All of these shows that they ever had, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, there's no work ethic with these monkeys. I'm telling you.
They're just not committed to the cause.
No, they're not. Unlike leprechauns, who are extremely hardworking. And that was interesting to me when you described the different clans of leprechauns, because if you put it all together, you get a classic leprechaun.
Right.
That they work hard, they're glib-tongued, what with the wishes and the trickery. They like to drink, they like to have a good time, they're prosperous, but they also work really hard. So that kind of, if you bundled them all together, you get the classic leprechaun.
That's good. That's exactly right. And where did I find that? Yeah, that was from Irish Genealogy Toolkit website. So they should know. They're in Ireland.
Listen, if an Irish person told me they'd seen a leprechaun, I would be like,
okay,
you did.
Fine.
Okay.
There. What? Here he goes.
Oh, there you go. Yay.
So he has Irish blood. And this is a funny thing. I was raised thinking I was at least half Irish. All my life, I have believed this, was raised in it. As a teenager, I had a map of Ireland on the wall and just reveled in my heritage as an Irishman. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, Lynn got me an Ancestry.com membership, or we signed up for it or whatever. And I started doing my family tree. And I traced back my parents, my grandparents on both sides, and their parents. And I never touched Ireland at all. And I remember telling my mama, because we were told that my grandfather on my mother's side had been born in Ireland and had moved to the States when he was about 5 years old. Well, I found his birth certificate from Greene County, Mississippi.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And it's like on March 17th, everybody is Irish.
I remember Ancestry.com. I sent them some of my stuff. They sent me a pack of seeds back, told me to start over.
There you go. All right. Back in 2019, the Irish Post said, we're going even further back, said back in 1989, what can only be described as a leprechaun suit was discovered on Carlingford Mountain in County Louth, alongside some small bones and a collection of 4 gold coins. It was a discovery that divided the wider public. Skeptics saw it as part of an elaborate hoax concocted by bored jokers after one too many pints of Guinness. To their way of thinking, this was just another example of Irish craik. But a handful of believers saw it as something else. Confirmation that some seed of truth existed underneath the centuries of fairy tales and folklore. Now, chief among them was Kevin McCoy. How do you say that? McCoylty Woods.
McCoylt.
Okay, McCoylt Woods, a man known to many as Ireland's last leprechaun whisperer. So I guess he can talk to the leprechauns. Though still skeptical, Woods was determined to discover the truth, and that same year led an organized leprechaun hunt in the region that sparked confusion and amusement alike. It would ultimately prove a fruitless endeavor, though, with no trace of the ancient Irish being discovered during their travails. Had the leprechauns gone into hiding? Had they died out? Did they ever exist in the first place? For a while, everything went quiet as interest in finding a real-life leprechaun died down. People returned to normal life, and the whole thing was just laughed off. But Woods was undeterred, and in 2002, he came across another discovery that prompted similar bafflement. Located close to a stone wall on Gone Road in Carlingford, he came across yet more gold coins. Now, had he planted the coins in the hope of adding to the mythology? It's unclear, though things took a turn for the strange when Woods then revealed, now get this, that the coins had apparently given him the ability to communicate with the Carreg, an elder being who apparently served as the elder of the 236 surviving leprechauns secretly living in the region. A baffling twist with its origins in as much fiction as fact. Quite whether the truth about the existence of leprechauns will ever emerge is unclear. But every year, so hang on, you might be able to go this year, on the second Sunday in May, Woods leads the annual Carlingford National Leprechaun Hunt through the Irish village. Now, here's an interesting note, and I'll go into more detail about it here in a little bit. But in 2009, the 236 surviving leprechauns in Ireland were afforded protection under the European Habitats Directive. As a matter of fact, let me go over there right now. Where'd it go? I was going to talk about this later, but since it come up in this story, we'll just go over it now. The European, where did I put that? Habitats Directive has included leprechauns under protection. Crap. Yeah. The directive was part of an effort to preserve the rich biodiversity of the area called Sliab Foy Loop, now a protected area for flora, fauna, wild animals, and leprechauns. It is a long, detailed procedure, and it has taken nearly 8 years to secure the future of our heritage, culture, and folklore. We are delighted in the knowledge that our little people will be protected from extinction and allowed to thrive on the mountains.
It's fantastic marketing.
Yes, it is. And the one caveat I'll put there is that now I did not do an exhaustive research, but in a cursory research of a little while, yeah, all you got to do is remove yourself if you got to go. Donnie's not used to doing this. I couldn't find the European habitats directive. I couldn't find it. I don't know if, like you said, it's just marketing, but I mean, I wanted to find the directive, and I wanted to locate where they actually made the declaration that leprechauns were included. But if somebody out there knows where to find that, then let us know.
I would like to go. I would like to go over there for Mr. Wood's event in May, but unfortunately, my conflict is that is the day that we have the organ grinder monkey hunt. So I'm already booked for that.
Exactly.
And I mean, I've got my net and everything.
There
so
you go.
Can't go do that. We don't need to protect leprechauns. I mean, and leprechauns don't need graves with clothes and gold coins. They're not in our realm. They're not physical humanoid beings. They're in an entirely, like the rest of the Fae, as I believe, are in a totally different level of existence or consciousness or reality. Yeah. And they can pop in and out whenever they want and appear to whomever they want. You don't have to be certified leprechaun whisperer. If it suits your purpose in life and what you need to do in life to run into a leprechaun, you will run into a leprechaun.
Right. And I mean, that's basically what you were saying in the previous show about fairies. There's no need to go looking for them. I mean, if something comes up and you need a leprechaun, hopefully a leprechaun will show up with you. Now, I found this website called the Unicorn Garden, and it's the author, Wayne Anderson. I'm sorry, he's the illustrator, and Neil McNamara, a.k.a. Nigel Suckling. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway, he has a book called The Leprechaun Companion. And as I peruse the website, he has several different books of cryptids and mythological creatures. And so he has a lot to offer on there. But he told a couple of stories, and these are typical leprechaun stories. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat. And I've not embellished or added to it. I'm just going to read it right off of his. This is out of his book called The Leprechaun Companion. This is one called, Donnie's back. This is one called A True Tale. About 2 centuries ago, a Molly Coggin of Kilmallock told the famous folklorist Thomas Crofton Croker about a leprechaun her grandfather had met and even caught. It happened like this. One night, as he went to the stable to tend his old mare, Grandpa Cogan heard something hammering, just for all the world like a shoemaker making a shoe, and whistling all the time the prettiest tune he had ever heard in his whole life before. He guessed what might be making the sound, and remembering tales of leprechauns and their gold, he crept in. He looked around, but never a bit of the little man could he see anywhere. But he heard him hammering and whistling, and so he looked and looked, till at last did he see the little fellow. And where was he, do you think? But in the girth under the mare, and there he was with his little bit and apron on him, and a hammer in his hand, and he was so busy with his work, and he was hammering and whistling so loud that he never minded my grandfather till he caught the leprechaun fast in his hand. Again, I wish I had an Irish accent, but Faith, I have you now, he says, and I'll never let you go till I get your purse, and that's what I want. So give it here to me at once now. Stop, cries the leprechaun. Stop till I get it for you. So my grandfather, like a fool, you see, opened his hand a bit, and the little fellow jumped away laughing. And he never saw him any more, and never a bit of the purse he got. Only the leprechaun left his little shoe that he was making, and my grandfather was mad enough angry with himself for letting him go, but he had the shoe all his life. And my own mother told me she often saw it and had it in her hand, and 'twas the prettiest little shoe she ever saw. And that's a typical leprechaun sighting. I heard one the other day that a man was out in the forest and he spied the leprechaun, snuck up on him, and captured him. And so he made the leprechaun tell him where the gold was buried. So he showed him this tree right under this tree. So the farmer didn't have anything to dig with. So he said, I'm going to tie a red ribbon around the tree so that I know where to come back to. And he said, before I let you go, leprechaun, you've got to promise that you will not remove the red ribbon from the tree. And the leprechaun said, I promise, I won't remove the red ribbon. So the farmer runs back to his barn, grabs a shovel, and comes back. And when he gets to the location where he had been earlier, the leprechaun had not removed the ribbon from the tree, but he had put red ribbons on every other tree in the forest. Mm-hmm. So that the farmer could not find the gold. They're tricky little beings.
They are. They're tricksters. They're tricksters. Yep. And you see that in the archetypes of the pantheon of the gods across the world. There'll always be a trickster in the game somewhere, because they keep us on our feet. Mm-hmm. And they remind us that you don't get things for free, and that you don't get things by cheating or by force.
True.
And the leprechaun, if the leprechaun within the Fae is derived from the old gods, there's one reference that talks about the leprechaun might have something to do with the god Lu. And Lu was an artisan. And you talked earlier about some of the clans talking about the leprechaun being very poetic and writing and all that, and Lu is a god associated with that. So if we're deriving a lot of this from the old legends and the old stories of the old gods, throwing that trickster energy in there, the leprechaun is the embodiment of that, and the embodiment of you have to work hard and you don't get something for nothing.
Exactly. And every time I hear the word trickster, I think of Loki from Norse mythology.
Yes.
And who you brought up in the first fairy show, how this kind of the fairies, how those Norse mythological gods kind of devolved down into fairy, not devolved, that's not a word I'm looking for, but
relegated.
Evolved,
they were relegated
into to fairies, and that's who they are now. So trickster is a good part of that. Of course, Marvel comic books made a strong supervillain out of him, along with making Thor a superhero.
He's an anti-hero. The trickster's an anti-hero role. Did you run across in your researching the leprechaun? One thing that interested me was the legend of, in America, native peoples talking about a critter that lives out in the woods and is a trickster and is a solitary, small little thing called a pukwudgie.
I didn't go specifically down the rabbit trail of pukwudgie, but I have a couple of stories coming up in just a minute that Tim Shepard found for us on Native American little people. But the pukwudgie is a good one. And I want to get into that in a second. I got a couple of pictures of some things. But one more story before we go into that. Tom Pierce and the Leprechaun. One cold winter evening, as Tom Pierce was heading for home, he heard a curious tapping sound close by and a cheerful whistling coming from under the hedge. As quiet as a mouse, he crept up, and what should he find but a little leprechaun no taller than his knee, sitting cross-legged on a pile of stones and tapping away at a tiny shoe. Such a racket was the little fellow making that he never heard Tom arrive. So Tom quickly reached out and caught him fast. Let me go, shrieked the leprechaun. What have I done to have you grab me so rudely? Nothing yet, replied Tom, but it's a lot I'm hoping you'll be able to do for me before I let you go. Now let's be having your magic purse that never runs short of gold. I must be getting careless, grumbled the leprechaun. That's the third time this week I've been caught, and they all want the same thing. My magic purse. My magic purse. I have no purse. I've been robbed already. All right, then, said Tom, who had been taught not to be too soft with a leprechaun. Then tell me there's some treasure buried nearby. Hasn't that also been taken already? Cried the leprechaun. I've been caught off so often by lummox like you that there's no treasure left in the country. What about my 3 wishes then? Asked Tom. The leprechaun looked crossed. So you know about the wishes then, he replied sulkily. I know all about leprechauns, my little feller. Why do you think I'm only blinking the one eye at a time? Don't I know that if I take both eyes off you for a second, you'll just vanish? All right, then, said the leprechaun at last. You can have the 3 wishes. But if you want my advice, you'll think carefully before making them. It's not as simple as you think, wishing for anything in the world. So Tom looked thoughtfully up at the sky where the stars were just beginning to twinkle, and the moon was rising out of the clouds. And, of course, when he looked back, he held nothing in his hand but the stump of a gorse bush. Mm-hmm. Got him again.
Right.
Got again. You just can't get over on these leprechauns. So just be careful if you do come across them. All right. Tim Shepard come across this, like I mentioned, from the Indian Country Today website, From Leprechauns to Our Little People, Respect Matters, from March of 2015 by a woman named Christina Rose. She says, I'm going to try to paraphrase all this because it's a long article, but it's got some interesting stuff. In 1932, 2 gold diggers in Wyoming's Pedro Mountains. I got a picture of that. Hold on. The Pedro Mountains. They blasted through a mountainside and found a 14-inch fully formed mummy. The little man was in a sitting position and described by one side as having wrinkled brown skin, a low flat forehead, and the appearance of an old man. Timothy McCleary from the Little Bighorn College on the Crow Reservation in Montana said the mummy ended up at a car dealer in Wyoming. He just kept it in a jar on his desk, and eventually somebody from the museum x-rayed it. Supposedly, this is what they x-rayed. And the American Museum of Natural History in New York and the anthropology department at Harvard University declared that the mummy was that of a 60-year-old man. It looks like Dobby the house elf off of Harry Potter to me. But I can't really see that. I don't know. I'm not looking at it in person. It just looks like something you'd buy in a store somewhere. But anyway, they go on to say that Wyoming is heavily populated by little people. They live like humans do, but they have spiritual powers. They cook, they hunt, they eat. They have fire. They're not going to hurt anybody, but they do like to play tricks. But it isn't mean. It's more that they have a sense of humor. In the Crow language, they are not called the little people. Get this. They are called the owners of the earth. They protect the animals. And so when people hunt for meat in the mountains, they have to leave some for them. Mm-hmm. There's an old trail to get to the mountains, and there's a 1,000-year-old monument where people to this day leave things for the little people because you are going into their home where they live. Mm-hmm. Now, this McCleary tells the story of a friend who went to the mountains to get away for a few days, and while sitting around the campfire, a little man came and visited. This went on for 3 nights, and when his friend left, the little man accompanied him home. Shortly after, both agreed it was uncomfortable for the little man to be away from his familiar surroundings, and the man returned the little man back into the mountains. Leslie Hanna, who is a Cherokee and a cultural expert, told of a similar story that happened in his own home. Leslie Hanna and his wife and daughter traveled frequently between his home in Oklahoma and Kansas, where he was working. When returning to Kansas from a Thanksgiving trip, his daughter, now this is going to sound familiar to some ghost stories you've heard. His daughter was only 3 or 4 at the time, came into her parents' room and asked to sleep with them. My wife and I were half asleep and said, okay. The next morning, I asked her why she had gotten in bed with us, and she said, that little man in my room, he's bothering me. Well, I kind of dismissed it and thought maybe she had had a dream. Well, the next night, she climbed again into our bed, and the next day, she said, well, again, that little man was bothering me. The next night before she went to bed, Hannah asked his daughter if the little man was still there, and she replied, he's right there in the closet. I asked her what he was doing, and she said, oh, he's just standing there looking at you. So he sat down and spoke in the direction of the little man. Clearly, you came back with us from Oklahoma, and you are welcome to stay here so long as you behave. But if you scare my daughter, I will come after you with some medicine, and I know people who can do that. And from that time on, she said he left. Now, the Cherokee Nation website describes their protocol for dealing with little people. The little people live in rocky shelters, caves, in the mountains, or laurel thickets. Like you said earlier, Elizabeth, earth spirits. Mm-hmm. They don't like being disturbed and may cause a person who continually bothers them to become puzzled throughout life. Because of this, traditional Cherokees will not investigate or look when they believe they hear little people. If one of the little people is accidentally seen, or if he or she chooses to show himself, it is not to be discussed or told of for at least 7 years. It is a common practice to not speak about the little people after nightfall. When I read this, I thought of our haunted theater show. Lewis Powell was in the mountains at a mountaintop theater, and he said he had been told the little people in the forest were watching, and that if he were going to converse with them, he had to learn how to speak their name. And he never told us the name, which I'm kind of glad. But he had been told this same thing, that you could, if you saw one, you couldn't speak of it for 7 years. And this was the thing, and he said that they had told him the name. He said he was walking up the road to the theater one night and was just mumbling under his breath, practicing the name of the little people of the woods. And he said right in the middle of his walk, he began to hear what sounded like children giggling off in the darkness of the trees. And after hearing that a few times, he quickly made his way to the theater and began to tell this, his experience, to someone else. And he said he was told that they were probably laughing at him for getting the pronunciation wrong.
I believe that a lot of the Native American references to the little people I've seen often talks about them as children. Mm-hmm. And they would completely, if they're considered revered guardians and keepers of the earth and the animals, right, and the nature, that very much goes in with the European tradition of the Fae that does the same thing. Mm-hmm. So the respect with which they're treated is well earned.
Yes. Now, one other There was another article, but it's basically telling the same story again. But the Shoshone Indians of Wyoming call this small race of people the Nemerigar. I think that's how you say it, or Nemigar. And this is one of their renditions of it. Yes. Let's see. Other skeletons of the little people have been said to have been found in other areas of the U.S. near Coshocton, Ohio, Coffee County, Tennessee. There have been several other sightings. Now, before we go into I want Elizabeht to share some of the symbology she's come across, and we'll talk about Leprechauns Day to close it out. But a kind of a serious thing when it comes to talking about leprechauns is the disease called leprechaunism or Donahue syndrome. Now, some people may have seen this and may have mistook this for being a leprechaun, but it is a serious disorder. It's rare, but it is called leprechaunism, also known as the Donahue syndrome, is an extremely rare disorder characterized by an abnormal resistance to insulin. Some researchers prefer the Donahue system because leprechaunism may be viewed as a pejorative by families, according to the online Mendelian inheritance in man. It is a recessive genetic disorder which occurs when an individual inherits 2 copies of an abnormal gene of the same trait. They experience the failure to thrive, which means they have a low birth weight and do not gain weight at the expected rate. They often lack muscle mass and may also have very low body fat under the skin. Characteristics of the syndrome also include abnormally large, low-set, and poorly developed ears, a wide, flat nose with upturned nostrils, large, thick lips and a large mouth, and widely spaced, bulging eyes. Affected babies may also have an abnormally small head or microcephaly. There may also be excessive hair growth. Most affected individuals have a skin condition called ankythosis and nigricans. I can't do medical terminology sometimes, in which certain patches of skin, such as body folds and creases, become thick, dark, and velvety. And that's from a Live Science website article called Leprechauns, the Fact About Irish Trickster Fairy. I mean, I think someone who's living with that disease, that could be why they call it leprechaunism, because a lot of the descriptions could fit. And it is a serious disease, and I don't want to make light of it. I don't want it to seem I'm making light of it. But we normally end our shows with some kind of supposition and thoughts. And I'm not saying that leprechauns have this disease. I'm just saying that some people may suffer from this. And I hope they figure out some way to help those folks, some kind of, it is a genetic disorder. Now, as we start winding down the show, Elizabeht said she had gone into some of the symbology of leprechauns, and we'd like to hear about that now. Hey, Elizabeht, you got a unique setup. Donnie, look at that. You got rays of light, and over to your right is a purple mist.
Uh-oh.
I don't want to move and look at it. It'll go away if I look at it right now.
Up above your left shoulder, you got rays of light coming down, and over to your, I guess it's your right, I'm sorry, there is a purple mist.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
I wish I could take a screenshot.
So maybe it's the ghost of an organ grinder's monkey, no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always intrigued by what keeps these legends alive and how across cultures, you can't have a culture more separated or different than the Native American peoples and the Irish. I mean, we're literally separated by an ocean, and they still have these similar tales and similar mystical beings in their history and in their mythology. And of course, that goes all the way out through Europe and all that in the Celtic countries. So I'm wondering what is the germ of truth? What's resonating in throughout these stories that unites people of all cultures? What are the symbols in here? And when we talk about the leprechaun, we talk about the three wishes, and we talk about the pot of gold, and we talk about the end of the rainbow. We already talked a little bit about the trickster energy of how you think you're going to get something for nothing, but you get tricked out of it by someone who's a little bit smarter than you are. The end of the rainbow has to do with the symbols of the realization of hopes and dreams, or looking for that endlessly, or putting off having your joy because you're always trying to get to the end of the rainbow. Similarly, a pot of gold also is, if you were to get a pot of gold, all your troubles would be over. Everything would be wonderful, and magic would happen, and you would be set for life. And then the three wishes also represent a sudden windfall of luck.
Yeah.
But all of this has within it the idea that you can't trust something that comes too easily, and you can't get something for nothing. You can't get it without hard work. That ties back into most ancient of stories. Think about the ancient story of King Midas, where we wanted everything he touched to turn to gold, and when he was granted this, then of course it was a horror. It was terrible for him. So when you have people who are living in times in our past that were much, much harder to keep yourself fed and clothed and alive, you were up against a lot more adversity. You might calm or soothe yourself by thinking, well, it's a good thing that I haven't met a leprechaun, and I'm doing fine, and only bad comes to those who might meet a leprechaun and get all the luck. It might be terrible. It would probably work out terrible. So there's that kind of soothing. It's okay that I don't have anything, and that I'm working this hard existence, because if suddenly I got the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or found the magical land at the rainbow's end, or had my magical wishes, I would probably just screw it up anyway. So best to be happy with what I have and make the most of my life and enjoy what I have right now. So I think that's kind of the uniting theme that goes across all of these leprechaun or leprechaun type creatures that show up with the ability to bestow riches on us if we were smart enough to get it. If we weren't, we would probably just screw it up anyway. So I think that's kind of where we go.
It's true.
With keeping people happy with what they've got.
Exactly. You're right. And I got a picture of you. Where'd I put it? I took a screenshot. See the mist and the rays of light?
The way that the light is hitting my screen here, I can't look at it, but I will certainly look at it more closely. Believe me.
Well, one of our regular viewers, Greg, says he's smoking a cigar and listening. We found out last week he was in Cleveland. So, Greg, thank you for being back with us, buddy. All right, before we close out, just want to remind you, of course, St. Patrick's Day is March 17th. And after that is Leprechauns Day on May 13th. Now, I didn't know that they had an official holiday, but they do. Leprechauns Day is May 13th. And the Days of the Year website recommends a few things to do on Leprechaun Day. Read some traditional Irish tales about leprechauns. Read a poem, which we gave you some of those today, so you can just repeat those. We gave you some traditional stories. But read a poem by Irish poet William Butler Yeats and learn more about their past. Here's one. Dress up in some leprechaun appropriate attire for a treasure hunt in the woods.
Or dress your monkey up in leprechaun attire. For a
There you
treasure
go. I've got a dress up leprechaun video coming up in just a second, so hold on. Take on the spirit of a leprechaun by adding some coins to your money box or by making a payment into a savings account. That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Try creating your own rainbows by spraying a gentle mist of water into the air when the sun is shining. Okay. Bake a leprechaun cake. Decorate it with green icing and Irish symbols, and then leave it out for them to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's some ideas for celebrating a Leprechaun Day, May the 13th. Put it on your calendars, May 13th. So, all right. Now, final thoughts, Elizabeth?
Well, I love that. I love the idea of honoring the spirit of the leprechauns, invoking some of that energy where you might leave a little offering out, like a little cake or a little cream or something, and use that to pull in some of that affirmative energy of the leprechauns, that if I work really hard and I'm really smart and I don't don't let fools take advantage of me, that I would like to invite that prosperous energy to come in and bless my hard work and my smarts too. I love that.
That's good. All right, Donnie.
I have really, really enjoyed this conversation about leprechauns. And all I can say really about leprechauns is they're magically delicious. That's about it.
All right. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this. These are my final thoughts. All right.
I love baby leprechaun.
You can check that out at thatdadblog.com. He's got him dressed up as Cupid and the elf on the shelf. Julie commented, enjoyed the show this afternoon, learned something new about leprechauns. Well, thank you, Julie.
Hey,
hope
Tom.
to see you again in 2 weeks. Yes, sir.
There's some right here that says Donnie is cute. I would like to go out with him.
No, I don't see that one. I missed that one, Donnie.
Oh, you missed it. You missed it.
I missed it. Okay, I think I got so busy and tied up in this one, I forgot to check what our show is in 2 weeks. But I think it's the I'm going to call it All About the Boom Boom. There have been some mysterious, what we think are sonic booms occurring around the United States, and we don't know why. Everybody denies it, from the Air Force, anybody that flies, geologists, everybody's denying it, but these booms are happening around the country. So I think that's what we're doing next week. But anyway, it's time to go, folks. And again, we want to thank Elizabeht Parker for being with us. Thank you so much for being here again.
So enjoyed it, Tom and Donnie. Thank you so much. It was a hoot.
Okay, awesome. We look forward to having you back again. And of course, Donnie Mills down there, my good friend, songwriter. We'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Thank y'all for being here.
All right.